Our Bible word is Acts 4 verse 12. Nor is there salvation in any other, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. So this is the Acts of the Apostles, and of course Luke also wrote the Gospel, and now he has a follow-up to his Gospel, and now he covers events roughly from 30 to 60, 62 AD, where he covers the spread of the early church. And our portion, the early chapters of Acts, focuses on Apostle Peter and all the other missionaries that were based in Jerusalem. So it focuses on Jerusalem and developments around Jerusalem, and yes, specifically of the activity of the apostles in Jerusalem. And our text goes back to what happens in Acts 3. There, the apostles Peter and John, they were on their way to the temple, and as they made the entrance to the temple, there was a man who sat there they brought him there every day for him to beg for alms from people who entered into the temple. And Peter tells him, I don't have money to give you, but what I have I will give you. In the name of Jesus, stand up. And the man stood up, and he was jumping around, obviously joyously, and he followed them into the temple, jumping up and down and praising God. And all the people saw this, and they were astonished because they knew him. Luke describes that this man was been healed from birth for more than 40 years. And so the people knew him because they recognized him. This is the man who sat by the entrance to the temple. And here he is now, jumping up and down, walking around, being perfectly healthy. So then Peter addressed the audience through a sermon, told them about Jesus, and then in chapter 4, then the people come to arrest them because there's this big commotion in the temple. They perform this healing. And we must understand that there are these apostles. They're from Galilee. They were fishermen. They were not part of the establishment. I mean, the temple hierarchy, it had very strong, powerful influence in Jewish society. Of course, it was ran by the high priests and all their retainers, those who supported them. I mean, they were like the government. And here is Peter, and he's performing this miracle. He's one completely outside of the system. He's not part of the power structure. He's one outside of the system. And he's performing this miracle. And there's this big commotion and excitement going on in the temple. So, of course, the temple authorities were not very happy. If we go to chapter 4, verse 1, it says, Now as they spoke to the people, the priests, the captain of the temple, and the Sadducees came upon them. And they were arrested. And it was already late, so they were kept over for trial before the high priest the next day. And if you read about this trial, you'll see that Luke specifically mentions Annas and Caiaphas. Now, of course, Annas and Caiaphas, they were the main power, the bigwigs of the temple structure. And they dominated Jewish leadership in the first century and the running of the temple, etc. And it's important to realize this. Annas, he was a high priest from 6 to 15 AD. And from his time until the crucifixion of Jesus, 25 of the 27 years, the high priests came from his family, be it Annas himself or his sons. So Annas was from 6 to 15, Eleazar was from 16 to 17, and then Joseph Caiaphas, that was the son-in-law of Annas. He was there from 18 to 37 for a very long stint. And this house of Annas continued to dominate the high priesthood. There was Jonathan and Theophilus and Matthias, and later on also another Annas, 2 Annases that followed after that. And the high priestly families, they made lots of money also from being in charge of the temple. Because the money changing in the temple, they profited from that. They sold animals for sacrifice, also made lots of money from that. And they were stinking rich, the high priestly families. So Annas, if you read of Caiaphas, who was the man in charge of Jesus' trial, also think of Annas. Annas, his father-in-law. Annas, he was like the Don, so to speak. He was the real power behind the high priesthood at this time. And they, of course, killed Jesus, because Jesus threatened them and their control of the temple. Jesus told them, you made it a den of thieves, because they profit so much from the temple. So they killed Jesus, and they're in charge of the establishment. They have incredible power and authority and control, etc. Of course, it's their source of wealth, their source of money. So yeah, there are these fishermen from Galilee. They perform this miracle. So they're outside the system, so they're brought before Annas and Caiaphas for trial. And if we go to verse 7, they ask them, by what power or by what name have you done this? Because this is out of the ordinary. Doesn't come through the normal power structure, etc. Then, of course, Peter goes on and he gives the answer. That's in verse 10. Let it be known to you all and to all the people of Israel that by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, whom you crucified, whom God raised from the dead, by him this man stands here before you whole. So Peter is also implicating the high priesthood here. He says, you killed Jesus, but God raised him from the dead. And by his name, the name of Jesus, this man was made well. So it completely undermines the authority. They thought they got rid of Jesus, the Jesus problem, if you can put it like that. But yeah, it's come back now. It's not gone away. Here are his apostles, his followers, and they healed in his name. In the next verse it says, this is the stone which was rejected by you builders, which has become the chief cornerstone. So here the apostles also saying, this Jesus is the cornerstone of the new temple. So in a way, Peter is telling these high priests, you're out of a job, essentially. The temple's still here, but essentially you're out of a job. You've been superseded because a new temple is being constructed around Jesus. He's the authority, whom you crucified. But God raised him from the dead. The early Christians, they believed in this new temple that's being constructed, but they were also faithful in this regard that they actually went to the temple regularly. They went to Solomon's porch, and we can read that in Acts 3 verse 46 and 5 to 12. And Solomon's porch was a colonnade that ran along the eastern side of the temple. That's where the early Christians often gathered. So they were still faithful Jews. They went to the temple, they prayed in the temple, they also preached in the temple, but their relationship with the temple was also ambiguous, because they're also saying, Jesus is the cornerstone, or it can also be translated as the capstone of the new temple. Everything is about him now. So the apostles also telling their Caiaphas and Annas and this powerful high priestly family that was in Jerusalem at the time, you're already out of a job, so to speak. You just don't know it yet. And you rejected this Jesus, you temple builders. But the real temple is being constructed around Jesus, whom you killed. And then we come to our Bible word. Nor is there salvation in any other, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. So these are strong claims. Peter is telling Annas and Caiaphas, the man who you killed, God raised him from the dead. The man who you killed, he's a source of salvation. And the man who you killed, through his name, this man was healed. That's the power and authority, or the source of our power and authority that we did this by. And of course, the high priests, they just couldn't punish Peter, whatever, because the evidence was there for all to see. The man was healed, who was lame for over 40 years. Everybody saw him jumping up and down in the temple. So they can't punish the apostles. So they held a conference and they said, you must not preach in this man's name. They want to get rid of the Jesus problem again. But of course, the Jesus problem is only starting because his apostles are proclaiming him. By his name, they perform this healing. And he is a source of salvation. Whom you, the high priests, whom you killed, you crucified him. But God raised him from the dead. So that problem you thought you got rid of is not away. It's still here for you. And in effect, you're out of a job. Because a new temple is being constructed. And the apostles form part of this process of building the temple.